Okay, we're on by a new paragraph, Gimel base 23b. All right. Starts the Mishnah. Ain't sudden dagger min habivarim. That one is not allowed to go ahead and trap fish from the pond. B'yamtiv an yamtiv. They nice and flame is nice, and you're not allowed to go ahead and feed them as well. Now, the reason is that trapping, even though it's true that trapping it's needed for food, so perhaps it should be permitted on Yom Tiv, but in this case, you could have done it yesterday, and therefore you're not allowed to do it today. And even though it might be in a pond, which is, even if it's a specific pond made for, let's say even if it's made to grow, it's made to raise fish, but still, any fish in its water, it's very hard to get. So therefore, removing it from the water is called trapping. And you're not allowed to feed it. Because again, at that point, that even though with other animals, it may be that you are obligated, because it's incumbent upon you to let it to help it survive. Therefore, you have to feed it. When it comes to fish, they're good enough to able to find food on their own. Therefore, you are not allowed to feed it. But one is permitted to go ahead and trap and to remove a wild animal and birds from an enclosure. And you're supposed to, and you're allowed to feed them because it's incumbent upon you for them to survive. If you don't feed them, they're going to die. And the reason over here, you're allowed to, at least according to the Tanakama, you're allowed to remove them from an enclosure, because in the case of the enclosure, it's going to be close enough to be called already trapped. Meaning, once they're already, you only could trap them once. They only could be in the state of either trapped or untrapped. In this case, the Tanakama hold this enclosure is called already trapped. So you, by removing them, that's not called trapping because they already were trapped. So if you have some animals running around in some enclosure and you somehow get it out and you wrangle it down and you get it out, we'll see exactly how far it's called, how big it has to be, how small it has to be. But at least according to the Tanakama, whenever an animal is already in an enclosed area, a wild animal or birds are in an enclosed area, you catching it and removing from that closed area is not called trapping because it's already trapped. Now, my video was on. Sorry about that. Okay, my video was on. I'm sorry about that. Okay, now, we are on the new Mishnah of Gimel and Beis, the new parak on 23b, and we are right towards the bottom of the Mishnah of that on that Amud. Now, Rabbi Boruch said no, because according to he said not all enclosures are equal, because seemingly, according to the words of the Tanakama, any enclosure, anytime an animal is already in an enclosure, that's called already trapped. And you cannot go ahead and trap it again. Therefore, you're allowed to remove it on Yom Tov because you're not trapping. But Shmuel says no. You have to take everything has to be everything has to be judged on its own. Like all of non-enclosures are equal. This is the rule. If it's lacking being trapped, meaning that it's not exactly called that you are able to get a hold of it so quickly. It's not so simple for you to grab this animal, and then we'll have to explain what that exactly means. But you still have to go ahead and trap it. You have to work in grabbing and getting a hold of it. That's called, it's still not trapped. Even though it's in an enclosure, it's not called trapped. And you by trapping it by removing from the enclosure on Yom Tiv, you getting a hold of it, that's called trapping, and it's not permitted. But if it's a enclosure which you don't have to work to trap it, you don't have to get a hold of it to remove it, then it's already trapped, and therefore there's no issur of trapping because it's already trapped. So you don't have to remove it. There's no issur on a smaller enclosure. And the Gemara will explain what each enclosure, what exactly is called trapped and not trapped. Okay, it says the Gemara. So we're going to start off with a question with an opposing Brisa. We have our Mishnah, and we have a Brisa that seems to contradict the Mishnah. It says, it says enclosures of wild animals and birds, you're not allowed to go ahead and remove them on Yom Tiv, and you don't feed them. So that's an exact opposite of our Mishnah. And the Tanakama of our Mishnah clearly said that when it comes to a wild animal and when it comes to birds, one is allowed to go ahead and remove it from the enclosure, and one is allowed to go ahead and feed it. So Kasha chaya chaya. So I have a question on wild animals to wild animals. The kasha ifes ifes. I have a question on birds to birds. So bishlei machaya achaya. So we're going to first tackle the question of bird, the wild animals. So number one, like kasha, it's not a question. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbanan. That one of these Bryce, one of them, either one of the Bryce Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, and either Bryce Mishnah is going to be the rabbis. Because Rabbi Yehuda says Hatzad Tzipor Limigdal. The one is that one traps a bird into a closet, into a tower, into a closet, more of a very contained space. With Tzvi Labayis, and a bird and a deer into a house, into a room. Chayiv, he's going to be chayiv. Now, because since you trap, it's not that you're trapping it. The point is that a bird flies into a closet and you close the doors behind it. You ended up doing you have now trapped the bird. And the same thing, a deer runs into a house. You shut the doors. Runs into a room. You shut the door behind it. You have now done the act of trapping. Now, however, if a bird technically would fly into a house, and you close the door behind it, that's not called trap. Because a bird could fly from corner to corner and it'll evade. You still have to work hard to go trap it. It can evade your hands and trying to get a hold of it. Plus, it could jump. It could go through the windows. Therefore, a bird has to be in a very contained space, either a tower, which I guess had no windows, or a closet where there's no escape once you close the door. And but a deer, once you get into a room, into an enclosed area, it's going to be you have transgressed the one of the 30 malachis of trapping. Now, so the Gemara figures says that a room you're chayiv. How will it be barn light? It has to be a room in a house. It has to be a house, but an enclosure not, which is going to be slightly larger. Now, so that is the Brisa. So Rabbi Yehuda is the Brisa that we start off the Gemara asking a question from a Brisa for a minute. We had a question that it seems that enclosure you are chayiv if you go. That. We said that you're not allowed to remove animals from an enclosure. The Mishnah says you are allowed to remove animals from enclosure. So the Brisa is Rabbi Yehuda, who held it has to be specifically a more enclosed area than just a typical pen of an animal or a typical field that's roped off. And therefore, he held that if you remove, if one goes ahead and therefore if you remove, so if you close the door behind, let's say you have a deer that runs. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have a deer that runs into a huge pen, and you close the door behind it. That is not called trapping because the deer has a lot of room to. The deer has a lot of room to maneuver. So therefore, when now when you actually get a hold of it and you remove it from the pen, that's called trapping. Till now, it wasn't trapped, and you by doing the act of getting hold of it, removing it to slaughter on Yom Tov, that is called trapping. Therefore, the Brisa that we started off with that clearly stated the one is. That one says that you're not allowed to remove it from the pen is because when it's not called trapped while it's in the pen, and we figure out because it says if you close the door behind a deer that's in a house, that's called trapping. But in the pen, it's not, and therefore because of pen, and then so when you actually remove it from the pen, now that is the trapping. The that the rabbi said that the bird that if you close it up in a tower or a closet, that is when you're chayiv for trapping. But tzvi legina or lechatzol bevir. And a tzvi and a deer is when you get it into a garden, you get into a courtyard, or you get into enclosure. And when you close those doors, you are now chayiv. And that's our Mishnah. Because the deer is in an enclosure already. And so therefore it already is trapped. Just like according to the Chachamim, when you close the doors behind a deer that ran into an enclosure or a courtyard or a garden, that is called trapping. Therefore, it's already trapped. So you are removing it from the garden, or from the enclosure, or from the courtyard. You didn't do anything wrong because it already has a status of trapped, and that's our Mishnah. That answers the question from the wild from the chaya from the wild animal. Now, what about birds? The case of the birds is still a problem because both Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim don't argue about a bird. They both say tzipor lemigdal. If you trap a bird into a closet, if a bird flies into the closet and you close the doors behind you, that is going to be only then it's chayiv. But the Mishnah said that if you get a bird into an enclosure, not just a very contained space with no windows like a closet, rather in even a larger space, you're still allowed to go ahead and remove it. That would tell us that if you go ahead and you close according to our Mishnah, logically it works that if the Mishnah says that you're allowed to remove a bird on Yom Tiv from an quote unquote an enclosure, that means it already has a status of trapped. That would also mean that if a bird flies into an enclosure and you close the door behind it, according to our Mishnah, you will be. That's at that point. You're going to be chai. Now, but our Brisa says, according to the Brisa, if you get a bird into an enclosure and you close the door behind it, that's not called trapped yet. You have to get into a much more contained space, like a closet. So that's the steer. That's a contradiction between our Mishnah and the Brisa. And we don't have an answer because both Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis hold that you have to get a bird into a bird has in order to be called trapped, it has to be into a small contained space like a closet. So and if you want to say, you know what, it's also not going to be a question because that the Mishnah is talking about that there's a roof and therefore it's already trapped. When we said that you're removing a bird in the Mishnah where he says it's permitted to remove birds from an enclosure, it's an enclosure with the roof. Therefore, the bird really couldn't escape. While but in the case of the Brisa, it's talking about where there is no roof. Therefore, you have to specifically get into a closet, which is an actual box. That we say, bias. It could be mikura dummy. But the Brisa is talking about a house, and a house usually has a roof. Ubein Rabbi Yehuda, ubein Rabbanan tzipur lemigdal, and bias like. Even according to Rabbi Rabbanan, even if you get into a house, you're not going to be chai for trapping. Therefore, if you have a bird flying around the house on Yom Tiv, according to Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim, and you remove it to slaughter it, that's going to be called trapping. Brisa says that's forbidden, and the Mishnah would seem to say that's going to be permitted. So what are we going to say? So Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, hacha betzipur dror askinan. She'ein makabel smaros. So we're talking about in the case of in the case of the Brisa that said a bird has to be in a much more contained space in order to be called trapped. You're talking about a tzipur dror. Tzipur dror was a type of animal a bird that was totally had no authority. It didn't follow anyone's authority. It was a wild bird that it lived in the house like in the field, and it was just and it was able to. It was very it was a wild bird, so it was used to trying to escape from predators. Therefore, even if you got into the house, it'll still be able to evade you or go to the corner, jump around, and from someone get out the door. The Tanur Deber Rishmol Lomanek Shama Tzipur Dror. Why is it called a tzipur, a bird, a dror bird? Shedara the bias shekibisada, because shedara, which means that it lives in a house like a field. So our answer is saying is as follows. And at the end of the day, the case of the Mishnah, we're talking about a much more domesticated bird. It's much more calmer, and therefore, once you get into a house, that's called trapped already, and therefore, it's not gonna get its way out. And therefore, once it's in an enclosure, obviously with the roof, otherwise it could fly off. So we're talking about an enclosure with the roof. Once it's an enclosure with the roof, that's already called trapped. Therefore, on Yom Tiv, if you have an enclosure with birds inside of it, then you could go remove them. That's not called. This because you're not doing the trapping already. It already has the status of being trapped. The Brisa is talking about a specific bird called the tzipur dror, even though if you get it into enclosure, if you get it even to a room, that's not called trapped. Because these birds know how to get out, and therefore it has to be in a much more enclosed case, an enclosed area, like a cabinet or a closet. Now, Gmara continues, Hashta the asas lahachi chaya chaya namli kasha. If this is the answer that you're going to give, that then we could give a similar, and also the case of the wild animals. On the wild animals, there's also not a question. The case of the Mishnah, we're talking about an extremely small enclosure. Therefore, any deer caught in this small enclosure is very hard. It's very easy to get a hold of because it's very contained. Therefore, it's going to be permitted, and it's not called trapping to remove it from the enclosure. In the case of the Brisa, we're talking about a very large enclosure. And therefore, just because you got a deer into the enclosure, it's not called trapped yet. You still have to work hard to pin it down. Therefore, in the case of the Brisa, it's talking about that's why you're not allowed to trap it. That's why if you get it into an enclosure and close the door, it's not going to be called trapping because it's a very large enclosure. Now, what is called a big enclosure? What's called a large enclosure? What's called a smaller enclosure? Amar Basi. Now, the bibir katan. Anything, whatever it means with one lunge, you're able to pin down the animal, whatever that exactly means. It means it's small enough that you don't have to take more than one step to get a hold of it. I imagine it's pretty small. And if you need more than that, if it takes more than that to actually pin down the animal, then that's called a large enclosure. Inami, another understanding would be the beer gadol, that anything that has corners, zovises, anything that has sharp like corners, that's called a large enclosure. And the other one is going to be a smaller one. I don't know what that exactly means. Maybe it's more round. I don't know what the difference between corners and corners are to something which does not need corners. I guess it's small. I'm not sure what gives the status of a corner, what's not. That's another understanding. Inami or that if the shadow of the wall could, when the sun's shining against one wall, the shadow will fall against the opposing wall. So therefore, it's close enough for one wall to have its shadow on the other wall. That's called a small enclosure. And the other one would be a large enclosure. So we found a few answers for the stira, for the contradiction between the Brisa and the Mishnah. Our Mishnah is talking about either we have a machlekes between sages. Our Mishnah holds there's an argument between sages exactly how large, exactly what is called an animal's trap. Is it in a house or in an enclosure? That's one way to understand it. And then the birds, and everyone, and the bird is because the Brisa is a wilder bird, and therefore it needs a much more contained space. And then we gave a few different, and then another answer was that the Mishnah is talking about a smaller pen, and the Brisa is talking about a larger pen. Therefore, the larger the pen, the less it's not called. If it's a large pen, it's not called trapped. Therefore, you removing it on Yom Tov, that is called, at that point, now has a status of being trapped. And the Mishnah is talking about, no, it was a very small pen. Therefore, it already was called trapped, and now you're allowed to have to go remove it on Yom Tov because you didn't do the act of trapping that already was placed on the animal before Yom Tov. Okay, now we're on the two dots on Chavdal and Aleph on 24a, a few lines up, about two lines up from the wide lines, and we're continuing the Mishnah where the Mishnah said we brought the counter opinion. Where Shimon Gamliel holds that not all these enclosures are equal, right? It depends if it's called trapped or not. If the animal has a status of trapped, then it's going to be permitted to remove it on Yom Tov. But if it's not called trapped, and therefore at that point you're not allowed to remove it on Yom Tov because you getting hold of it on Yom Tov, that's called trapping. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The halacha is like the Shimon Gamliel that depends on the size of the enclosure. So you have to, he's not giving us exactly a size. He's just telling us that use your judgment. Is this animal called trapped or not?
Why is there a machlokes? Even not Shimon, we just learned that it's a chiluk between the beaver cotton and the beaver gadol.
Yeah.
So really, what's he saying differently? This is saying depends on the size.
You're right. How much? I don't know. I thought about that. Rashi saying again? So it could be then he's more, I don't know. It could be because, or he's being more lenient, or he's being more makel. I'm not sure.
It's one lunge.
More than one lunge, right? So Amrle Habaya halacha mechlal de pligi. So on that we say from the fact that you say Amrle Habaya halacha mechlal de pligi. So from the fact that you're saying that that the halachas of Shimon ben Gamliel, we see from here that the Rabbanan are going to be arguing. There's people who argue on Shimon ben Gamliel, and I think this is your point, right? What? Yeah, Rashi says. No, so Rashi is saying that perhaps that this is the point. There's no machlekes. Yeah. So very good. Yeah. So we're coming out that. So the Gemara. So we said what's this? Yeah, Rashi says it. Yeah, Rashi said. So. So it's like this. We're coming out that Rabbi Yehuda said that the halach is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. That depends on the size. On that, Abaye asked, but based on one of the answers in the previous Gemara, we came out that there really is no machlekes. There's really no argument because everyone agrees that depends on the size, right? A large pen is called that it's not trapped. A small pen that is called that it's. And the Mishnah was talking about a small. The reason why the Mishnah said he allowed to remove a deer from its enclosure because it's a small enclosure. Small enclosure equals already trapped. Where Shimon Gamliel says he seems to agree depends on the size. So on that, Abai says, so who cares? Why are you telling me like Shimon Gamliel? There's no you're not telling him anything because the rabbis also agree to this. So Amarle Gamra Gamor Zumrasa Taha. He says, what do you mean? Just you're asking me for practical difference, but at the end of the day, I'm still learning. I'm still learning Torah, and I'm not just saying Gemara just to repeat it for no reason. I wanted to get everything clear. Who holds what, regardless of the practical outcome, which is a little interesting because there's no machlokes, right? That's what he's saying. He's agreeing there's no machlokes, which is a little interesting because I understand when it comes to Gemara, everything Gemara says there has to be some practical difference. All learning is in order, it's not maybe the biggest. Like overall, whenever the Gemara asks, Gemara always goes, what's the difference? Because Gemara is talking about we learn on in order to apply it to our life, to apply the halacha that we learn from the Gemara in life. So everything has a practical difference. So that's for the Gemara. So when the Gemara writes something, there has to be a practical difference. But if you're saying in the name of someone, perhaps at that point he was just in this specific case. He was, even though it's not usually not this way. In this specific case, he was just learning for the sake of learning, and he wanted to know who held what. Okay. Zaklal. So we came out is a kol mechusar seida. Again, these are the words of Shimon Gamliel. That at the end of the day, the rule is it depends if something's lacking being trapped. What's called lacking? What's called mechusar seida? Amar V'Yosef from Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Shmuel. Kol she'omer haba mitzuda ministan. That how do you know? So how do you know if something if something is called if the enclosure is big enough they call not trapped, and the enclosure small enough to be called already trapped. So Rabbi Yosef said, he said that if you get your gear together and you say, okay, I'm going out to trap. If you say I'm going out to trap, that's called that this is trapping. But if you just walk out and you grab the animal without saying anything, then that's not called trap. Now, that when it comes to geese and chickens, that you do say, let's go out and trap it. And you trap, if one goes ahead and traps chickens and geese and a type of a dove, yoina, and Rashi explains that it was named after Hortus. Well, it's a mechlekes. Either it was named after Hortus, who was the or it was named after a place. Anyway, the point is pater. You're pater. So here we have you want to tell me that what is called trapped is when you go out. What's called trapping animals when you say, okay, let's go trap an animal. It depends how you explain what you're doing. But we have a case here that you do trap these birds, these three birds, and you said I'm going to trap it, and you're pater, and you're not, and you're not chayiv, and you're not you have not transgressed the third malacha, one of the third malachas of trapping. But you said it. You said I'm going out to trap. So Amar Rabbi Boruch Amar Shmuel halalu ba'an l'chluvin le'er. That these chickens and geese, they come back to their coop at night. Halalu ein ba'an l'chluvin le'er. And these don't come back to their coop at night. Now, so we come from here that so it's 2 points now. Number one, you have to say let's go out and trap. That only applies to animals which are wild and they run around and they don't understand. They're not domesticated. They don't understand to come back at night. While these birds will come back at night. Therefore, it's never called trap. You'll just because they are always have the status of trap because they're always going to come back at night to their pen or to the coop, and therefore it's easy to get them anyway. So a type of doves that live on the roof, or doves that lives on the higher on the upper rooms in the house, in the attic. Anyway, two different types of yoni. The ban l'chavon l'erek. They do come back to their coops at night. V'tanya hatzad yoni shuvach v'yoni aliyah v'tziparim shekananu mit plichin b'bayis chayv. So now we're further asking the question. But there are type of birds that do come back at night to their coop, and still we say that if you trap them, you are chayiv. So why are you telling me that the geese and the chickens that it's never called if you trap it, it's never called trapping them on Yom Tov because they always come back at night. But we found some different type of birds that they do come back at night, and you're still chayiv if you trap them. So Ella Amar Rabba Baruch Huna Amar Shmuel Lolu Ban Lechluvim LeErev Ubeznoisen Alecha. That the chicken and the geese, they come back to the coop at night. Plus, they expect they need you to survive. You are feeding them. But these other types of doves, they do come back at night. But you are not mechuyev to go ahead and it's not on you to feed them because they're able to feed themselves. And Rashi explains at that point that if they're coming back to feed from you, that's called mezuman. They're yours. at any point they will always come back at night because they need to survive by getting food from you, and therefore it's called they are always ready for your use. While it comes to the other birds, even though they come back every single night, but they don't need you. If they really want, they'll just fly off and they'll never come back. They can find another home. They could do whatever they want. They don't need you to come back. While the chicken, at least, will always be back because they know their instinct, their animal's instinct is we got to get back in order to eat. And therefore, it's always called that they're ready to be slaughtered in a way because they're always going to be there at night. Now, Rav Mari Amar Hani, so Rav Mari used to say that Hani avidi l'rebuye, Hani lo avidi to the rebuye. That the those animals, so again we have he's coming to answer a question that we had the chicken and the geese and the Hordean dove. These fowl or these birds would they come back at night, and therefore it's not called you're trapping them. You're putter if you trap them. While these two the doves that live in the attic and on the roofs, these doves, if you trap them, you are chayiv, even though they do come back at night. So our first answer is that because you feed them. One you feed, one counts on you to survive, the other does not. His answer is a different answer, that these doves that live on the roofs and in the attics, they could evade capture extremely easy. They could escape. While the chicken and the geese do not. So that's the fine difference between the two. Okay. Because Rashi says because they run away from in front of people. So it's not called when you go near a chicken, it doesn't run away from you for the most part. Therefore, you grabbing, it's not called trapping. You just pick it up and you walk away. There's no tactical, there's no tactic in order to get them. You just grab them. While everything else, you have to set up a trap in order to get them, and therefore that's called trapping. And that we say, and that we're asking a question, but they're all, they all could escape. So we say and that the Gemara asks, what do you mean? Chickens could also always run away. So we're talking about in the coop. That once they're in the coop, they don't leave. They go there, they settle for the night, and that's where they stay. While when it comes the other type, that the other type of birds, these doves that live in the roofs, they go ahead and they could always even once it gets into the coop, they could escape. So it's just a practical difference between the two, that one stays and the other not necessarily staying. Therefore, grabbing the one that doesn't always stick around, that's called trapping, but it's not guaranteed to stick around. While the chicken, it's easy to grab and it never really moves from its coop. Okay, so that is this Mishnah. We're up to the new Mishnah on 24a. Says the Mishnah. So now, if you have traps of a chaya, wild animal, oif, some birds, v'dagim, and fish, she'asam erev Yom Tiv, that they were set on Yom Tiv, lo yitel mehem b'Yom Tiv, that you're not allowed to. So basically, erev Yom Tiv, yeah, fine. Sorry, if you set a trap erev Yom Tiv, and then you wake up Yom Tiv morning, you go check out your trap, and all of a sudden, behold, you have a deer caught in your trap, or you have some animal caught in your trap. Now, you're not allowed to utilize that on Yom Tiv. Unless you know for a fact, unless you know for a fact that the animal got caught in the trap on before Yom Tiv. Now, now the reason is because at that point, the Gemara will explain. At that point, meaning in order for utilize an animal to slaughter an animal that was caught in a trap, it has to be that it was caught before Yom Tiv, because it has to be mezuman, it has to be set aside to be eaten, to be slaughtered erev Yom Tiv. But if it gets trapped on Yom Tiv, that means at nightfall it wasn't set aside for you, and therefore it's going to be aser. Now there's a story Maisa benachmi echad. There's a story with one non-Jew. Shavi dagim l'Rabbi Gamliel, that he brought fish, I guess, to Rabbi Gamliel on Yom Tiv. V'amar mutarnei. So Rabbi Gamliel says it's permitted. El she'ein ritzayni l'kabel himenu. I have no interest in accepting it from him. Now Rashi explains that Sha'ani Sunay, that he didn't like him. He didn't like this guy. Therefore, he didn't want any favors from him. Therefore, he didn't want to take it from him. But technically, it was permitted. And that Gemara asks, now, if you're wondering what's going on here, first the Mishnah says that it has to be trapped before Yom. You have to, in fact, trap before Yom. Then we have a case that he brought along, and then we have a case that the Rabbi Gamliel was willing to accept the fish on Yom Tiv. Well, that's, because it says Gemara, Ma'aseh Listar. That's a huge contradiction. One, because in the beginning of the Mishnah, it seems that you are not allowed to have fish, to eat, not allowed to fish any animal that gets trapped, unless you know for a fact that was trapped before Yom Tov. And here we have Rabbi Gamliel willing to accept from this Nachri, who's willing to accept from this non-Jew this fish on Yom Tov. How did he even know that it was trapped on? Perhaps it was trapped on Yom Tov and should be forbidden. So Ma'aseh, it's a contradicting story to the beginning of the Mishnah. So Gemara answers, the Gemara answers that it's lacking. Parts of the story are lacking. This is how we fill it in. Now, answer Safik Muchan Aser. That it's true if you know for a fact that it was trapped before Yom Tov. If you know for a fact that it was trapped on Yom Tov, then everyone agrees that's forbidden. However, what if you're not sure? You're not sure if it got trapped before Yom Tov, it got trapped after Yom Tov, meaning you set the trap days before Yom Tov, and you only check it on Yom Tov, and therefore, very well, you don't know when it got trapped. And then we say that then, according to the Tanakama, it's forbidden. In the case of a doubt, you're not allowed to. Rabbi Gamliel says it's permitted. Now, and now we're backing up this Rabbi Gamliel who held that it's permitted in a case of a doubt. We're backing that up with a story that we had a Nachri that brought fish to Rabbi Gamliel v'Omer mutarhin. He said it's permitted. Ella shani writes in the Kabbalah menu, but I'd rather not take it from him. So now it's no longer a contradiction. And now we know there's an argument that was not mentioned in the Mishnah that everyone agrees that if it got trapped on Yom Tov, it's going to be forbidden. If it got trapped before Yom Tov, everyone agrees that it's permitted. The question is, when you're in doubt, what do you do? On that we have a machlekes. Okay, now Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, ein halacha k'Rabbi Gamliel. The halacha is not like Rabbi Gamliel, meaning that when you're not sure if it was trapped or not trapped on Erev Yom Tov, or if it was trapped on Yom Tov or Erev Yom Tov, or it was before Yom Tov, then it's forbidden. Now, ikad damasi la'aha, the Tani Safik Muchan Ragul Matir. So some learn it this way, that as follows: Safik Muchan, if it's a doubt, if it was prepared before Yom Tov, then Rabbi Gamliel Matir, Rabbi Shua Aser. Rabbi Gamliel says it's permitted, and Rabbi Shua says that it's forbidden. And Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Shua. And Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Shmuel, said that the halacha is like Rabbi Shua, that if it's a suffix, if it's a doubt, if it was prepared, meaning it was ready to be removed from the trap on Yom Tov, or it was before Yom Tov, then the halacha is that it's going to be forbidden. Now, some say it this way. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, and we turn to the top of Dalam Beis 24b. That that one could go ahead and shecht and slaughter. You could go ahead and slaughter from negoirin. What is that? Pods. It is bivar. Rashi says that it's just from the enclosure. Bivar. So it's the same idea. It's already trapped. It's already enclosed in Yom Tov. So one could go ahead and slaughter animals that are already trapped before Yom Tov. You can't do it from the traps, and you can't do it from the nets. Now that makes sense, because when you find them in the traps and the nets, you don't know when they got trapped. So now it's a case of a doubt. But if you're just taking them from your enclosure, you know very well that they were already set there. They were set aside before Yom Tov. Now Rabbi Shimon Lazar says, if you go ahead, that if you find animals in the nets before Yom Tov, then you know for a fact, of course, that that they were trapped before Yom Tov, and therefore they will be permitted. But if you find them in the nets on Yom Tov, then we know that they were, meaning it seems like we're saying that you checked them right before Yom Tov, and it was empty. You find them on Yom Tov, then you know that they were correct. They were obviously collected in the nets on Yom Tov. Now, so therefore, that is, again, this is another way to explain to us. We have a machlekes, there's an argument. What's halacha if you're doubtful when? Why is that? What? Okay, Haguf Akasha. Okay. So Haguf Akasha. So Amrit Bo Matzan Mukol. That itself is a question. Yeah. Amrit Bo Matzan Mukol Erev Yom Tov do Hashem Erev Yom Tov inside. That if you come and you find them Erev Yom Tov, now you know for a fact that they were collected or they were trapped before Yom Tov. Taima Debo Matzan Mukol Ha Sfeik Asur. So we see from here that it has to be for a fact that they're before Yom Tov. But if you come on Yom Tov and you find them, so you know for a fact that you have to know for a fact that it was before Yom Tov. Ema Seifa, let's look at the Seifa. Bo Matan Mukokal B'Yom Tov Ubiduash B'Yom Tov Tzadu, that if you come and you see them trapped, you check, you know for a fact they were empty before Yom Tov. And you come on Yom Tov and you see that they're trapped, they're forbidden because you see that on Yom Tov, we see that they were trapped on Yom Tov. Taima Debo Matan Mukokal. The reason is because you found them on Yom Tov. So we see from, but if you do the math, that's only if you know for a vada, you know for a fact that they were trapped on Yom Tov. However, if you're not sure if it was from Erev Yom Tov, if they're trapped before Yom Tov or they're trapped on Yom Tov, then we say, then it's going to be permitted. So, be making a diuk in the Mishnah, we have a contradiction from the beginning of the Bryce, the beginning and the end. In the beginning, it seems to be saying that if in the case of a doubt, it's going to be forbidden, and in the end of the Mishnah saying if it's a doubt, then it's going to be permitted. So it's a contradiction. And now we say Haka Amar Uba this Haki Kamar. We say this way you should say Bo Matzim Mukuklim Erev Yom Tov. If you come and you see them trapped on Yom Tov, Biduashim Erev Yom Tov Tzadu Mutar. Then we know for a fact that they were trapped on Yom Tov itself, and they were trapped Erev Yom Tov before Yom Tov, and of course they're going to be permitted. Hasveika Nasa Kmishin Tzadu Bi Yom Tov Asur. But the ending was saying that, but if you go ahead and you find them on Yom Tov and you're not sure if they're before Yom Tov or they're trapped before Yom Tov or on Yom Tov, it be treated as if it was trapped on Yom Tov and it was forbidden. So again, according to this Beitza, at least according to Rabbi Shimon Lazar, in a case of a suffix, in a case when you're not sure, then it's forbidden. And the Rabbi Shimon Lazar, then in a case of a doubt, it's forbidden. So we brought down three different ways to come out that the halacha is that if one in a doubt, if an animal is trapped before Yom Tov or on Yom Tov, it's going to be forbidden. Okay, now in the story of Reb Gamliel, he said that it was permitted, meaning he said that the Nachri brought him the fish and he says, Mutar, it's going to be permitted. Now, Levi Amor, now the question was, what's it going to be permitted in? Levi Omer, Mutar ba'achila. Levi said that it's permitted to eat. Amarav, the oilam, fine. So that's what Levi wanted to say. Now, Rav said that as follows. So Amar, sorry, I skipped. Let me repeat that. Mutar l'mai. Rav Amar mutar l'kabel. That Rav said that's permitted to accept it, meaning it's not going to be muksa. But you're not allowed to go. But even to eat it that much, Rabbi, he did not let you. He didn't let you eat it. Meaning if you bring fish, if an Andrew brings fish to you on Yom Tov, you're not sure when it got trapped. You got to get trapped on Yom Tov or before Yom Tov. So it's enough that we don't let you eat it on Yom Tov because of a suffix. Even according to Rabbi Gamliel, he never let you eat it. It's just like it's not muksa anymore. That the doubt is enough to tell you that it's not muksa, but the doubt's not enough to let you go ahead and cook it and eat it. Levi said it's even permitted to go ahead, and Rabbi Gamliel held that it's permitted to go ahead and even eat it. Now, Amar Rav. So Rav said as follows. Remember, Rav was the one who Rav held that you only can move it and not eat it, and Levi said that you're not even allowed to eat it. So Amar Rav, one should not remove himself from the base medrash, from the study hall, even for 1 minute. That I and Levi, Levi's arguing on him, but Levi and myself, we came in front of Rebbe. That in the morning, when in the beginning, when he was saying over the entire Gemara, he was saying that it's permitted to eat the tafra, but later on, Amar Mutar Lakaba. He changed his mind and he said that no, it's only permitted to accept and have a Beit Midrasha. I was there the entire time; I never left. Hadri Beit Levi Leihavik Midrasha. So therefore, Hadri Beit. I heard him take it back. He took back his original. He said is permitted to eat. Then Rebbe changed his mind later on, and I heard him retract it. Levi, they have a bit rush, but Levi, I guess, left at some point. He heard the first part. He didn't hear the second part. Like have a hadar, he himself, meaning he didn't retract it. He never understood that Rebbe retracted it. So Rav is saying that number one, Levi is wrong, and also the reason why Levi is wrong is because he left the base Spanish early and didn't hear the entire shir. Now, Meisvei, we have a question. Nachrish Avidar in Yisrael, a non-Jew that brings a present to a Yisrael, afilu dagim hamufal, even if they're very moist fish, or Paris b'nei or Paris that would look like they were just picked. They were picked today. Mutar is permitted. Now, Bishlei Mamanda Mutarin Lakabel Shaper, according to the one that says that when we say mutter, it doesn't mean mutter to eat. It means you could accept it. That we understand. Ela Lamand Amar Mutarin Ba'achila. But if you want to tell me that's permitted to eat, Paris b'nei Yomi Mishar Ba'achila. If they are picked today, of course they're forbidden. You're not allowed to pick a apple off a tree on Yom Tov or Shabbos and eat it. That's totally forbidden. So it doesn't make sense that when we say permitted can't mean to eat. It has to be that's permitted to receive it. And now we ask, according to your reasoning, Paris b'nei Yomin misharu b'tiltol. Are you permitted to go ahead and move a fruit which you picked today? It's not a fruit that you picked today is going to be muksa as well. You're not allowed to move it. So first we wanted to say that you were permitted to go ahead and accept a fruit, fresh fruit, and moist fish. Now we thought, what does permitted mean? If you mean that's permitted to eat, we say it might be permitted to eat because of course you're not allowed to eat the fruit. Now we say we're not allowed permitted to move it either. So what is it? What does permitted mean? We're talking about the kavuri, the adimi, or perit kavishi, the yarka. That we're talking about a type of red fish and fruit which are hidden in vegetables. And somehow this, I don't know how the process is, but you're keeping they kept the fruit very fresh. You're able to keep the fruit in some enclosed vegetable, and that was like it was fresh. And I don't know what's with this red fish, but I guess it remains fresh longer than other fish. Yeah, is that what Arshel says? Oh, it's red, and you're able to check that it's still moist. It's red, and the moisture doesn't leave it. All right. Anyway, the point is that of course it wasn't picked today. That everyone agrees. So Amar Papa. So therefore we're saying it's permitted. So now if that's true, then we're saying then it makes sense that now we didn't answer the question, but at least it's permitted to move. So Papa El Chasa Nachashev Yidarn Yisrael B'Yemtov Emish Moisei Hamin B'Mechubar Aser. So what's the halacha at the end of the day? So first of all, we didn't answer our question, right? We didn't answer our question if we're talking about if it was if you're allowed to eat it or if you're just allowed to move it. I guess that's the machlekes, right? That's the machlekes Rav and Levi. Rav is going to say that it's not muksa, but Levi is going to say that it is. Levi is going to say that you're not allowed to eat it, unless someone tells me that this fruit, the way they hide the fruit in this type of fish, you could tell that it's like it's fresh, but from the fact that they put it into the vegetables, it must be that it's not from today, because otherwise, why would they be putting it into vegetables? I'm not sure. What? No, let's finish.
Vegetables kind of preserve.
I just want to finish up. What? Yeah, it preserves it. Right? Okay, let's finish up. Amra Papa What's the halacha? So the halacha is that a non-Jew that brings a present to Yisrael and Yom Tov, that if they have this type of, if it's in season, that this is the picking season for this fruit, then it's forbidden because it might be picked today. Well, Erev Nami Yisur B'Chlei Shasu, and not only that, after Yom Tov and Shabbos, on Yom Tov, after that, you have to wait the amount of time it takes to pick it and bring it over to your house. So you have to wait that time stamp. However, if this is not in season and it's not on the vine or not on the stem or whatever, if it came from outside the tchum, it's going to be forbidden. But if it's going to be inside the tchum, at that point, it's going to be for if it's in the tchum, then it'll be permitted. Okay, we'll end here and we'll continue. We might have to go back a little bit tomorrow, but we'll continue. Thank you.